reducing spending, reducing taxes, making the government smaller and focused on defending the individual rights of the citizens, as opposed to this monster government we have now, which is a welfare state, that is an argument that has to be made, and I would have expected Ted Cruz to make such an argument, and I didn't hear too much about that.
I think he has. He's talked about returning government to its constitutional roots. He's talked about the Constitution and limiting it to the Constitution. Unfortunately, in school they don't teach the Constitution today, so many people probably don't even know what he's talking about. What are these constitutional liberties and what are freedoms?
I mean the economic consequence of why a limited government creates prosperity. The argument of how and why a limited government creates prosperity and gives the people those jobs that they want, that Trump is promising by creating a trade war.
Yeah. No, the trade wars don't create jobs. The entrepreneurs create jobs, and innovation, the motivation and the incentive to create jobs comes from people who want to pursue, right? So you have life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Liberty is no good to anyone who's dead, and you can't pursue unless you're free to pursue. And so that freedom leads to innovation, and people can do better by doing well and by being inventive, innovative, and competing and doing better than the next guy, and getting up every morning and figuring out how to get people to part voluntarily. Remember, the whole free enterprise system is based on a volunteer. As a volunteer system, you can't get my dollars unless you're going to exchange something that would have me want what you have, your product or service, more than I want the dollars. And so the whole thing is based on a voluntary system, and so entrepreneurs and capitalists have to be thinking of three things every day: the needs, wants, and desires of their customers. That's the opposite of selfishness. It's actually, frankly, the opposite of greed. Greed is the idea that you hoard to oneself. Greed doesn't work in a capitalist society.
In order to be successful, you got to focus on the other guy's needs and wants, and then you can be successful.
To be successful in the capitalist society, you have to, one, not be selfish thinking about yourself, but thinking about the needs, wants, and desires of your customers. Two, you can't be greedy, because greed is hoarding assets to oneself. Any capitalist entrepreneur knows that in order to get a return on investment, you have to cast out your capital like bread on the water, and with the hope that it might return. And so that's what risk takers do, and in the process they create jobs.
So to put it a little bit differently, the same point, in a capitalist free market system, it's based on mutual consent.
That's right.
The judgment of each citizen is respected. The government doesn't force people to do one thing or another. That's freedom, that's a free market, that's capitalism, and it is essentially the only moral system, right? Because it doesn't force people to act against their judgment, it respects people's judgment.
Well, that's precisely right. I mean, the capitalist system, and capitalism has somehow become a dirty word, but the capitalist system represents the voluntary transaction between you and your neighbor. So if you want to buy a good or service, you don't have to buy that good or service, and you have a range of choices to buy good or services. What government does is they pick winners and losers, so they narrow the choices, and when choices are narrowed, then people don't have to improve their products or services because there's no competition. So in a capitalist system, everybody who creates a service or product is always thinking, how do I be more efficient, or how do I offer something better, or how do I offer a better product either at a lower price or sometimes at a higher price, but how do I get something that people actually want? I mean, a good example of that is the iPhone that most people carry around. The iPhone wasn't around years ago, and it was a superior product of what everybody else was producing, so people voluntarily parted with their dollars to buy very expensive iPhones because it made their life better, and they got to use it for all kinds of things. Now, someone else in the future will invent something better than the iPhone, and people will laugh when you have the iPhone just the way they laughed that you had a BlackBerry.
Well, I wish I had heard these arguments more in the debates instead of all these insults, but anyway.
I do too.
Rick, thanks a lot for your time and for elaborating on what I would have wished to have heard in these debates.
Yeah, thanks.
Take care. Good luck.